Hi, happy Monday. And now we begin chapter 8, which is the chapter on newspapers. And what I have here is a prezi of the chapter content, and we'll go through this relatively quickly, and I'll probably do a very short additional video lecture of some other material I wanted to include to augment or supplement the textbook. So first, let's sort of do a review of chapter content very quickly. So certainly we have the history of newspaper, which essentially can be summarized in this whole rise and decline of newspapers. The chapter focuses on the American newspaper, which is fine. And certainly when you look at the evolution of American newspapers, there are some interesting items to be considered. You'll notice, let me see if I can skip this over just a little. I'm not sure that I can. Yes, I can. There we go. So you can stop and read what I've written there later. Obviously, video, you can stop at any time you want to. But the photograph here is of something called Public Occurrences, which was a 1690 Coranto, which was one of the precursors of the newspaper as we know it today. It was actually discovered by accident in the basement of the British Library. So a nice little surprise. So these were local pamphlets, and like I said, they sort of became the ancestor of the newspaper. By the time the penny press era was in full swing, newspapers at that point in this format were considered quote-unquote mass medium. They were the main way that the American public became aware of information that was going around. These were located on street corners, and obviously most of them for a penny, not by the subscription model that we know nowadays. And then of course the Associated Press happened in this era. We're talking 1800s, as you can read. Then about the late 1800s, we have the infamous age of yellow journalism. And this is when newspapers were all about sensationalism, about exaggeration, about doing the most dramatic, stunning headlines that would grab more readers, more people to purchase your particular paper. The two main owners, the most incredibly wealthy individual, Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. Obviously, both of those names are probably familiar with. Certainly Pulitzer, the Pulitzer Prize, Hearst, of course, California, we have the Hearst Castle. So very strong personalities, and they fought vehemently. In fact, probably some of the material that I'll give you to look at later on in this early learning unit will focus on the dispute between the two of them and its impact on newspapers. As a result of some of the loss of credibility of newspapers during this era, there developed sort of this two different competing models of modern print journalism. And basically, you could have bare bones, just the facts model of the story, and then more of a narrative model, the story model. Just the facts became the objectivity model in modern journalism, and you can find that information, and certainly the New York Times was one of the key leaders in that particular style. But some people wanted more. They wanted analysis. They wanted opinion. They wanted interpretation. That led to the interpretive approach to journalism, which was a little bit more. It was journalism that took a side. It was journalism that analyzed and gave strong opinions. And notice the rank of responsibilities that are listed here. First, you supply the facts. Second, you give an analysis. And obviously that's going to be subjective. And third, you can advocate a certain position or a certain plan on an issue. Very different model and different approach than the just the facts or objectivity model. Next, looking more toward today, in terms of the business ownership of newspapers, there are many types of newspapers and different focuses, different things that describe them and characterize them, and different roles that they play. And you can read that here. Essentially, it boils down to consensus, which is local, and conflict, which is more the focusing on the things that are different and that deviate. In terms of orientation, you may or may not be surprised to know that oftentimes the news is only 30 to 50% of the content of a newspaper, and the remainder is advertising. And which has been one of the greatest struggles today for newspapers who are trying to find a way to create revenue in the digital realm. In terms of newspaper chains, it used to be such that a single newspaper company would own 20 or 30 different newspapers within their particular chain. And they've lost their power somewhat, and you find many large corporations with many media conglomerates selling off different newspapers because of their revenue holes. They just don't make the money that they used to. And anyways, you can read more as we go to that. So there are a lot of challenges that face newspapers today, and one of the most significant is this: the idea that readership has declined dramatically within the U.S. Certainly your generation, the younger generation, is just not a big newspaper consuming population. And so many, either newspapers have decided, why fight it? Let's go with a very narrow, targeted audience, and let's focus on that. That's why some very small local papers have done well, because they've decided to focus only on the local. University papers many times have done well. So that's been one approach. The blogs have been a challenge to newspapers. The idea of that you can have an amateur journalist, that you can have Joe Bob on the street who's going to blog about what he saw and his opinion on it. And it's actually sort of been adopted more recently by several major news corporations to try to capitalize on the notion of blogs. And in terms of convergence, trying to move from the analog to the digital, a lot of newspapers see a lot of wonderful things in terms of the digital realm and the internet and the flexibility that they can have, particularly with all the links and the multimedia links that they can come up with. But it's not a way for them to make money. And so I think you might find it interesting that many of these online newspapers are attempting to find a way to create an entry point whereby people have to pay a fee in order to access that information. But obviously there are so many newspapers and so much is available online. There are a lot of ways around it, and most of us, if we can get our news for free, we'll do it. So the three of these problems have led to a couple of new approaches to journalism and different business models. And so you'll see some of them mentioned here. But an interesting emphasis is the idea of community journalism, which, similar to the idea that was first promoted with the blogging material, that we have activist amateurs who are out there capturing stories, voicing opinions, and many news organizations are attempting to sort of recruit these citizen journalists in an effort to get their news stories and to make up for a lot of the cuts that they've had to make to their own staff. On today's contemporary journalism, a couple of radical things that had occurred. When USA Today first came out, their whole cover page was very different than anything else that you had previously seen in newspapers. Predominantly it was very much a black and white industry. Color was reserved to the comic strip. And USA Today sort of challenged that, used a lot more color in their papers, and designed their vending boxes that they sold in a different way, and basically mimicked tried to mimic a more mediated news in terms of what you'd find on television. Entirely different approach, thought outside the box. Certainly what you see today in online journalism has redefined the way things have occurred, and many times online journalism has replaced the newspaper. I know for many years I had the New York Times delivered to my computer in the morning, and it was just the headlines is all I wanted. I just, so I signed it. It was free. I got it every morning. I'd spend 15 minutes with my coffee reading the headlines, and that sort of became the norm. And in terms of newspapers and democracy, newspapers still have a critical role, most particularly in times of crises. It still is a dangerous profession, as you can see. And many people have often wondered, what would the world be like without newspapers, without reporters on the ground? And what will happen in a digital age? Ultimately, what will come of newspapers as we know them today. So that's it in a nutshell in terms of this chapter. Like I said, I'll add a little bit more material with some information I want to supplement, but for now, that's it.